All right, let's jump right in. We're talking about a really pivotal moment in history, between 1200 and 1450, across this massive area we call Afro-Eurasia. And what's so fascinating is that this wasn't just about more ships on the sea or more caravans in the desert. The world was being rewired in a fundamental way, creating these cultural shockwaves we can still feel today. And that phrase right there, that's the key to this whole explainer. It's so easy to just picture the stuff being traded, silks, spices, gold. But the most important cargo wasn't physical at all. These trade routes became something else entirely. They became highways for ideas. So here's the bottom line. The most transformative cargo wasn't something you could hold in your hands. It was beliefs, new technologies, and groundbreaking knowledge. This era was really defined by this incredible, unprecedented exchange of culture, and we're going to break down exactly how that all went down. So let's start with one of the biggest ripple effects, the movement of major world religions. And these weren't just quiet personal beliefs. They were powerful, society-shaping forces that traveled right alongside the merchants and their goods. Okay, to really get how this all worked, you gotta know this one word, syncretism. It's a huge concept for this period. See, religions didn't just show up and completely replace whatever was there before. No way. They blended, they mixed, they adapted, creating something totally new and unique to that place. And Buddhism's journey is a fantastic example of this in action. It starts in India, right? And it travels these legendary Silk Roads. But when it gets to China, it doesn't just take over. To make sense to the locals, Buddhist ideas were often explained using familiar concepts from Taoism. And that blend, it creates something new, Chan Buddhism, which then continues its journey to Japan, where it evolves yet again into what many of us now know as Zen. It's a perfect case study in a faith adapting to survive and thrive. And these ideas weren't just flowing east and west. They were also heading south, down along the Indian Ocean sea lanes. And here, it often wasn't just about personal belief. If you were a ruler in a powerful empire, adopting Hinduism or Buddhism was a savvy political move. It helped cement your authority and connected you to the super prestigious culture of India. And the result? Breathtaking monuments like Angkor Wat, which is literally faith carved into stone. Now, let's talk about the incredibly powerful link between Islam and trade. The idea of Dar al-Islam, or the House of Islam, created this enormous interconnected zone. You can almost think of it like a giant common market with shared laws, language, and culture that made doing business way easier and safer. So if you were a ruler on the Swahili coast of Africa, converting to Islam was a no-brainer. It plugged you directly into these incredibly rich trade networks, and as a result, cities like Kilwa and Mombasa just exploded in wealth and influence. And you don't even need an artifact or a ruin to see this fusion. You just have to listen. The Swahili language itself is like a living fossil of this history. Its foundation, its grammar, is from local Bantu languages, but it's jam-packed with Arabic words brought by centuries of traders. The language is the history, all baked right in. Okay, so we've got faith crisscrossing the map. But it wasn't just spiritual ideas on the move. We're talking about secular knowledge too, science, philosophy, and some really game-changing technologies that would completely reshape the world. Okay, this story is just mind-blowing. After the Roman Empire fell, Western Europe lost access to most of the foundational works of Greek philosophy, thinkers like Plato and Aristotle. But that knowledge wasn't gone. It was meticulously preserved, translated into Arabic, and expanded upon by brilliant Muslim scholars in places like Baghdad's famous House of Wisdom. Then, centuries later, this incredible library of knowledge gets translated again and makes its way back into Europe, reintroducing a whole world of classical thought that helped light the fuse for the Renaissance. What an incredible journey. This shows you how a technology can totally change its meaning as it travels. Gunpowder is invented in China, and for a long time, it's used mostly for fun stuff like fireworks and loud celebrations. But as that knowledge spreads west along the trade routes, people in the Islamic empires and in Europe look at this explosive powder and see a weapon. They perfect it for warfare, and all of a sudden, those giant castle walls that had been impenetrable for centuries, not so safe anymore. This one transfer of technology completely upended the military balance of power. And speaking of world-changing tech, let's talk about paper, another Chinese invention that slowly made its way west. Its arrival in Europe was absolutely crucial. Why? Because having a cheap, easy-to-make material to write on was the essential ingredient needed for the printing revolution that was just around the corner. Suddenly, information wasn't just for the super rich anymore. It could be copied and spread farther and faster than ever before, which, as you can imagine, changed everything. So, we've seen how ideas and technologies flowed across the map. But what about the actual places they flowed through? The cities. Well, for a city, being a major hub on these networks could be an amazing blessing and a terrible curse. This right here is the perfect example of that double-edged sword. On one hand, you have cities like Hangzhou in China or the legendary Samarkand on the Silk Road. They became unbelievably wealthy, massive, cosmopolitan centers of the world because all this trade flowed through them. But that same connectivity that brought them riches also made them a target. The same routes that carried silk could also carry conquering armies. Baghdad, a beacon of learning, was brutally sacked by the Mongols, and Constantinople, the great gateway city, was eventually conquered by the Ottomans. Your greatest strengths was also your greatest vulnerability. But this wasn't just about abstract forces and big trends. This interconnected world was experienced by real people, individuals who went on these absolutely epic journeys. And their stories, they're the living proof of this new kind of global connection. We're lucky enough to have records from 3 incredible individuals, and each of them was traveling for a totally different reason. We've got Ibn Battuta, a Moroccan scholar on a religious quest. Then there's Marjorie Kemp, an English mystic driven by her visions. And of course, Marco Polo, the Venetian merchant looking for profit. Together, their stories give us this amazing, human-level view of what this world was actually like. First up, Ibn Battuta. Just look at that number, 75,000 miles. He set off from Morocco planning to make the pilgrimage to Mecca, and he just kind of kept going for 30 years. He traveled a distance that is just staggering to think about, covering nearly the entire Islamic world and writing down almost everything he saw. It's an absolute treasure trove. Marjorie Kemp gives us a totally different window into this world. She couldn't read or write. She was an English mystic who felt compelled by her faith to visit holy sites across Europe and the Middle East. And she dictated her life story, which gives us this incredibly rare, non-elite, and deeply personal account. It's not the perspective of a scholar or a merchant. It's the raw experience of a woman on a spiritual journey. And then you have the most famous of the 3, Marco Polo. He was a merchant, and his book about his travels to the court of Kublai Khan in China was a sensation. Now, whether he embellished some of his stories or not is beside the point. His descriptions of unbelievable wealth and a society that seemed light years ahead of Europe absolutely captivated the European imagination. It lit a fire, creating this intense curiosity and desire for the legendary riches of the East. So, after all that, what's the big takeaway? The most important thing to remember is that the explosion in connectivity during this time was about so much more than just economics. It wasn't just about making a profit. It was a force that reshaped religions, governments, and entire societies from the ground up. I think this phrase just nails it. You can think of trade as the powerful engine that was driving all of this new interaction. But the truly world-changing cargo, that wasn't the silk or the spices. It was the culture, the new ideas, and the incredible innovations that sparked change wherever they landed. And that kind of leaves us with a final question to chew on, right? It makes you think about our own time. In our hyper-connected digital world, what are the new highways? The internet? Social media platforms? And maybe more importantly, what are the big ideas, the cultural cargo that they're carrying across the globe right now? Definitely something to think about.